Montana Territory, July 1876. The sky broke open in a storm the same day Naomi Burrell buried her husband. She stood under a torn canvas tarp strung between two fence posts, hair soaked, fists clenched around the sleeves of her black dress. The preacher's words were carried off by the wind, but she did not need them. The hole in the ground beside her said all there was to say. Her boys, Owen and Oliver, stood close. Owen, 8, gripped her hand like he was afraid she might vanish next. Oliver, 6, kept staring at the coffin, his face blank and pale. When the last handful of dirt thudded over the pine box, the mourners drifted away, boots squelching in the mud. Naomi stayed behind, even after the rain turned cold and sharp. She had not cried yet. She would not in front of her sons. She only turned when a horse approached slow behind her, the hoofbeats quiet in the wet soil. He dismounted before she saw his face. "Ma'am," he said gently, removing his hat. "Name's Silas Granger. You do not know me, but I knew your husband. Rode with him once years back, heard what happened." Naomi studied him. Tall, lean, eyes like riverbed stone, steady, quiet. His shirt was soaked through and rain slid down his jaw. He was no stranger to hardship. She could see that plain. "Thank you," she said, voice hoarse. "But if you're looking for work or a place to warm up, I can't help you. My husband's gone. He left me this land and 2 boys to feed and not much else." "I am not here for work," he said. "I came to pay respects and offer help if you will have it." She stared at him. "You do not even know me." "I know what it is to be left behind," he said. "And I do not believe a woman should shoulder it all alone, not with little ones." That night Naomi let him sleep in the barn. She told herself it was only until the storm passed. The next morning, Silas was already working before the sun rose. Naomi watched from the kitchen window as he hauled broken fence posts, stacked wood, and checked the roof of the chicken coop where the rain had gotten in. He never asked for thanks, never looked to her for permission. He just did what needed doing. The boys followed him like shadows. Owen asked questions that never seemed to tire him. Oliver was quieter, but Naomi caught him smiling once when Silas let him hold the reins of his big bay gelding. By the end of the week, the ranch looked less like a graveyard and more like something that might survive. Naomi cooked for him. She told herself it was only fair. He was doing the work of 3 men. One night after the boys had gone to bed, she found him sitting on the porch mending a saddle strap by lantern light. "You could have moved on," she said, arms crossed. "There is work in Helena, gold in the hills." He looked up. "That what you want?" "For me to leave? I do not know what I want." Silas set the strap down. "I'm not here to take something from you, Naomi." She looked away. "Everyone leaves. Men lie or die or get tired of the work. They always leave." Silas stood slow. He stepped down from the porch and into the dirt, boots crunching under him. "Look at me," she did. Against everything in her, she did. "I have no plans of leaving," he said, voice low. "Unless you tell me to, or unless they lower me in the ground." She could not speak. Her throat burned. He nodded once and went back to his saddle. Weeks passed like that. When a rustler came through trying to take a horse, Silas caught him before he got past the southern fence, held him at gunpoint until the sheriff rode out from town. After that, Naomi stopped locking the doors at night. She caught herself watching him sometimes, how he moved, how he spoke to the boys like they were his own. He never overstepped, never tried to take her husband's place. But he was there, solid, constant. One evening, Owen climbed into Naomi's lap and whispered, "Can we keep him?" She laughed despite herself. "He is not a stray dog." "He fixed the wagon," Owen said, "and he helped me with my reading." Oliver added quietly, "He makes you smile, Mama." She looked out the window. Silas was in the barn, brushing down the gelding. Lantern light flickered over his shoulders. He moved slow, patient, and her heart, quiet for so long, began to ache in a way that did not hurt. The first time he touched her, it was nothing more than his hand over hers as she passed him a tin cup. But her breath caught. He looked at her and she knew he had felt it too. He stepped back. She did not stop him, but she did not sleep that night. It was not fast what grew between them. But it was not slow either. One morning, Naomi found Silas teaching Oliver how to tie a proper knot. The boy's small fingers fumbled, but Silas never lost patience. Later, when Naomi handed him a biscuit, she said, "You are good with them." "I care about them," he said simply, her breath hitched. "Naomi," he said, voice rough. "I never planned for this, but I am here. And I am not leaving." She looked at him, long and quiet, her heart thudded hard in her chest. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "But if I let myself want this and you walk away, I will not," he said, stepping close. "Not ever." She reached for him, his hand met hers. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she did not feel alone. It was not long before the neighbors began to talk. Naomi did not care, her boys were happy. The land was healing. And Silas, he was not a dream, he was real, he was hers. One night he kissed her under the stars. It was not rushed, it was not uncertain, it was everything she had tried not to want. "I love you," she whispered, breath trembling. He touched her cheek, eyes locked on hers. "I have loved you since the day I saw you standing in the rain, too stubborn to cry," he said. "You said I would leave you someday, but the only way I am leaving is when they lower me in the ground." She kissed him again, and this time she did not hold back. The wind carried the scent of cut hay and distant pine as late August settled over the valley. The days still held heat, but the edges had cooled, and the air moved differently, like it knew the season was shifting, even if the land wasn't ready to admit it. Naomi stood at the edge of the west pasture, skirts brushing her boots, watching as Silas and Owen strung wire across a new fence line. Oliver sat nearby with a basket of nails, his small hands careful, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The sun caught in his hair, turning it the color of ripened wheat. She hadn't meant to let herself feel this settled. "I can take the boys into town tomorrow," Silas said that evening, wiping sweat from his brow as he leaned against the porch rail. "That McAllister woman's been talkin' about startin' a schoolhouse behind the chapel." Naomi folded the last of the laundry, pressing her hand flat over a worn shirt sleeve. "They'll need books," she said, "and boots that fit. Oliver's toes are near through the leather." "I'll sell the extra lumber," he said, "should cover most of it." She paused, eyes lifting. "That's your money, it's for our life," he said, voice even. "What's mine is yours, Naomi, has been for some time now." She didn't answer at first. The quiet stretched between them, filled only by the sound of crickets and the creak of the rocking chair where Owen sat half asleep with his head tucked against the side. "You ever think about leaving before you met me?" she asked after a while. He turned his head slowly, the porch lamp catching the line of his jaw. "There were times I thought I'd never stop moving, no roots, no cause to stay, and now," he reached out, brushing a speck of hay from her sleeve. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." The next morning, Naomi let him take the boys into town alone. She watched them ride off, Oliver tucked in front of Silas, Owen holding the reins with fierce pride. The sight left her standing still long after their figures blurred into the dust. Inside, she found herself moving differently. There was no one to cook for just yet, no small voices trailing her through the house. She swept the floor, not because it needed it, but because it gave her hands something to do. Then she opened the trunk at the foot of her bed and lifted out a folded quilt she hadn't touched since her husband passed. She carried it to the porch and sat with it across her lap, fingers tracing the stitching. She'd sewn it during her first Montana winter, long before Oliver had been born, piecing it together by firelight while the wind howled against the shutters. It had kept them warm when the firewood ran low and the snow piled high enough to block the door. She hadn't unwrapped it since he died. She did now. Not because she missed what was gone, but because something new was growing, something she hadn't expected and now couldn't imagine living without. The sun was low when Silas returned, the boys chattering beside him. Owen's hair was slicked back with water, and Oliver held a slate board like it was treasure. "They'll start lessons after the harvest," Silas said, tying his horse. "McAllister says she'll need help fixing the roof before then." Naomi touched Oliver's shoulder. "Did you thank him?" "Yes, Mama," he said, beaming. Silas says I'll be reading before the snow comes. When the boys went inside to show off their books, Naomi stayed behind. You didn't have to do all that, she said, voice low. I wanted to. She hesitated. They're not just my boys anymore, are they? He looked at her, slow and steady. They haven't been for a while. She reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. Later, as dusk turned the sky to ash and rose, she sat beside him on the porch again. The air smelled of dust and wood smoke. Inside, the boys were asleep, the sound of their breathing soft behind the walls. I don't want a wedding, she said suddenly. Silas turned toward her, brows lifting. I mean, she folded her arms. Not the kind with ribbons and a preacher and half the county staring. I don't need that. What do you need? She looked at him, her voice quiet. Just you, a promise, something I can count on. He didn't hesitate. I'll give you that, now or whenever you ask. She nodded, her throat thick. I've already made it in my heart, he went on. But if you want it spoken, I'll speak it. If you want it written, I'll write it. I want it lived, she said. He smiled, soft and sure. That I can do. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. When she leaned against him, he wrapped an arm around her. The porch boards creaked beneath them, the stars blinked awake overhead, and the quiet between them was no longer empty. It was full with hope, with belonging, with the weight and worth of a life they were building together. Silas didn't promise forever. He didn't have to. By mid-September, the cottonwoods along the creek had turned gold. Their leaves whispered constantly, even when the air stood still. Naomi watched them from the garden, hands deep in the soil as she lifted the last of the potatoes. Her back ached from the bending, but the baskets filled fast, and that brought its own kind of comfort. She was learning to trust the land again. Silas came around the side of the house with a coil of rope slung over his shoulder and a half-finished gate hinge in his hand. His shirt was streaked with dust, and a thin scratch ran along his forearm. You catch yourself on that broken latch again? Naomi asked without looking up. Fence post gave out near the north line, he said. Took half the rail with it. I need to dig it deeper this time, down past the frost. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. I'll come help once I've got these carried in. His eyes stayed on her a moment longer than needed. You ought to rest. I've been resting for 10 years, she said, lifting a basket. I didn't come all this way to sit soft. He didn't argue. He never did when she used that tone. They worked in quiet rhythm through the afternoon, digging and hauling, tamping the earth firm around the new post. Naomi's sleeves were damp with sweat, her braid heavy against her spine. She didn't mind. The work felt honest. As they packed away the tools, Silas paused, looking out across the pasture toward the distant tree line where the last of the sun was falling. You ever think of going back east? He asked. To where you were born. She leaned against the fence rail, wiping her hands on her apron. Not once, he turned toward her. No family left there. An older sister in Ohio, I think. Haven't written her in years. She didn't take kindly to me marrying a rancher and heading west. Said I'd lose myself out here. Did you? Naomi looked at the calluses on her palms, the dirt under her nails. No, I think I found myself. Silas nodded slow. I used to think I'd settle in Wyoming, he said. There's a river there near Lander, runs clear all year. But I never got past Billings. What stopped you? He met her eyes. A widow with 2 boys and a stubborn streak. She held his gaze for a beat longer than she meant to, then broke it, lifting the gate latch to test the fit. This'll hold through winter. Silas stepped closer. So will we. That night, after the boys had gone quiet in their beds, Naomi stood by the kitchen window, drying the last of the dishes. The moon hung low behind the barn, casting long shadows through the yard. Silas came in carrying a small wooden box. He set it gently on the table. What's that? She asked, drying her hands. He opened it. Inside lay a length of blue ribbon, a folded scrap of yellowed paper, and a ring simple, plain, the band dulled with age. It was my mother's, he said. My father bought it from a peddler outside Abilene. She wore it through every hard year they had. Naomi stared at it, her throat tightening. I've carried it in my saddlebag for years, he said. Didn't know why. She stepped closer. "You sure you want to give it up?" "I'm not giving it up," he said. "I'm giving it to you. If you'll wear it." She didn't reach for it right away. Instead, she touched his wrist, her fingers light against his skin. "I don't need proof," she said gently. "I do," he said. "Not for you, for me. I want to walk this land knowing I've given you everything I have to give." Naomi picked up the ring. It was heavier than it looked. She slipped it onto her finger and held it there, watching the way the metal caught the lamplight. "I'll wear it," she said. "But not because I need it. Because I want to." Silas lowered his forehead to hers. Neither of them moved for a long time. Later, as they sat on the edge of the bed, boots off, the windows open to the sound of crickets, Naomi spoke again. "I used to think if I let someone in, I'd lose what I worked to build. That I'd get swallowed up in someone else's life." Silas leaned back on his elbows. "And now I see you're not asking me to give anything up," she said. "You're offering to carry it with me." He didn't respond right away. When he did, it came quiet. "I meant what I said before. You'll never be alone again, not unless you want to be. I'll see this life through beside you, every hard mile." She pulled the blanket over her lap, watching the breeze stir the curtain. "I believe you," she whispered. Silas reached for her hand beneath the quilt, and she let him hold it until they both fell asleep. By the time the first frost came, Naomi had planted garlic in the narrow strip behind the barn and lined the windows with wool rags to keep out the creeping wind. The boys had taken to lessons with surprising ease, Oliver especially, who now practiced his letters on any scrap of paper he could find, whispering the sounds to himself as he wrote. Owen spent more time with Silas these days, asking about how to winter calves or split kindling without dulling the blade. Naomi let them circle him, even when it ached a little, watching her sons look to another man for guidance. That ache had softened over time, replaced by something steadier. That morning she found Silas in the lean-to, sharpening a short-handled axe. The sky was low with snow clouds, the scent of iron and wood smoke thick in the air. "You ever spend a winter this far north?" she asked, stepping inside. "Only once," he said, testing the blade's edge with his thumb. "North of Fort Benton, years back, got caught in a whiteout, thought I'd never feel my feet again." She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You planning to stay through the cold then?" His eyes lifted to hers. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere," she nodded, quiet. Then, after a beat, "There's a cabin up the hill, just a foundation now. Ezra meant to rebuild it for the boys when they were grown." Silas set the axe aside. "You want it finished? I want to know what it feels like to build something from the start. With someone who means to stay." He picked up his gloves. "Then we'll haul up stone before the ground freezes." They began the next day. Naomi stood beside him as he measured the old foundation, her hands raw from hauling rock, her breath visible in the sharp air. Silas didn't speak unless there was something worth saying. That suited her. They moved like two people who understood the cost of silence and the value of it too. At supper, Silas brought in a squirrel he'd snared and dressed it while the boys watched, fascinated. Naomi basted it with the last of the cider vinegar and laid it over the fire, then sat back on her heels, wiping her brow with her sleeve. "You ever think about having more?" Silas asked, low enough that the boys wouldn't hear. She didn't answer right away. "I swore I wouldn't," she said finally. "After Ezra thought it'd be wrong or too hard." Silas didn't press. "But things feel different now," she continued. "Like the soil's still good for planting, and I'm not afraid of the growing." He set his cup down, the light from the fire catching the side of his face. "If it happens, I'd raise them the same as these two with you on this land." She turned toward the hearth. "I never pictured it, not with anyone else." After the boys were asleep, she stepped outside and found him on the porch, twisting a bit of twine in his fingers. "You ever want a thing so bad it scared you?" she asked. "I've wanted a home since before I knew what to call it," he said. "Didn't think I'd find it in a widow's field behind a broken fence." She lowered herself beside him. "You're not just fixing what was broken, Silas. You're building something that never was." He looked at her, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled something wrapped in cloth. He placed it in her hands. Inside was a carved whistle, smooth and pale, strung with a leather cord. I made it before I met you, he said. Didn't know who it was for. She traced the edge with her thumb. You made this by hand, every bit. She tied it around her neck, fingers steady. I'll wear it, she said, so long as you're the one at my back. I will be, he said, voice rough, until they lower me in the ground, Naomi. And even after, if I can help it. She rested her head on his shoulder. The porch creaked beneath them, wind stirring the bare branches. Inside, the fire burned low. The boys stirred once, then fell still again. Naomi closed her eyes, the whistle warm against her chest. She was no longer waiting for someone to stay, he already had. The snow came in early November, heavy and sure, blanketing the fields in silence. Naomi stood in the loft of the barn one morning, brushing hay from her gloves, watching the white drift through the open slats. Below, Silas was fitting a new bridle over the gelding's head, calm and careful, his breath fogging in the cold air. She stepped down the ladder, boots thudding against the packed dirt. You'll freeze without a coat, she said, tugging the lapel of his collar up. Silas glanced over. I was waiting for you to notice. She pulled her shawl tighter. I made a list for town, lamp oil, flour, salt. The boys need wool for new mittens. You still planning to ride in tomorrow, he nodded. Weather's holding. I'll take Owen with me if that suits you. He's been asking after the farrier again. He's nearly 9, she said. I suppose it's time he learns how to barter his own coin. Silas smiled with his eyes. He'll do fine, I'll keep him close. Naomi ran her hand along the worn wood of the stall door. I'll stay back with Oliver. He's been favoring his leg since that tumble in the creek. Silas leaned against the post. You ever think you'd be living like this, not just getting by, but belonging to something? She said. No. Not until you. That night she found Oliver asleep beside the hearth, one hand curled around a wooden horse Silas had carved. She laid a quilt over him and turned down the lamp, standing for a long while in the hush that followed. Outside, the wind shifted. She could hear it moving through the frozen trees. She found Silas in the bedroom, packing his saddlebag. You riding into town for supplies, she said. That's the sort of thing a husband does. He paused, then looked up. Are you asking? I'm saying, she said, stepping closer, that I want to say vows with you, not for the town, not for show, just us, in our field, under the sky, his hands stilled. When? Tomorrow morning, she said, before you ride out. He breathed in once deep. Then I'll shave, she smiled. You'd better. They rose before dawn. Naomi wrapped herself in a wool cloak, her hair braided back with a strip of cotton ribbon. The boys stood beside the porch, eyes wide with the weight of the moment. Silas had washed and shaved, his coat brushed clean. He held her hands in the quiet frost of morning, their breath rising between them like smoke. I swear to walk beside you, he said, voice even, through every season, every storm. She met his eyes. And I swear to share this life with you, not just the ease of it, but the labor. The hard and the holy. Oliver stepped forward and handed them a length of twine, the same one Silas had once carried in his coat. Naomi tied it loosely around their joined hands, no preacher, no crowd, just the land, the boys, the snow, and a promise. Afterward, Silas mounted up with Owen behind him. Naomi stood with Oliver at the edge of the path, watching them disappear into the trees. Her hand still held the warmth of his. By dusk, they returned with wool, flour, and matches. Owen grinned from ear to ear, holding a small pouch of peppermint bark from the general store. Naomi kissed Silas once on the porch, the kind of kiss that spoke plainly of home. Winter deepened. The cabin on the hill rose, timber by timber. By January it had a roof, a stove, and a door Silas carved with their initials. When the storms came, they stayed warm. When the days lengthened, the boys ran circles in the yard, chasing each other until their laughter echoed past the fence lines. One evening in March, Naomi sat on the cabin step, sewing a hem that wouldn't lie flat. Silas came up behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Oliver asked if we'd stay here forever, she said. Silas sat beside her. What did you tell him? That forever's a long time, she said. But I don't see any reason to leave. He leaned in, voice low. There's a child coming. She turned toward him, lips parted. "You're sure?" "I've seen the signs," he said. "And I know you've been tired in the mornings. And you're carrying yourself different." She pressed her hand to her belly, quiet a long moment. "I wasn't ready to hope." "I was," he said. "Every day," she leaned into him. "Then we'll raise them here with the others on this land with no running." "No running," he agreed. That spring, Naomi gave birth to a daughter as the lilacs bloomed behind the house. She named her Clara after her mother. Silas held the child like he'd held the reins of a fractious colt, gentle, reverent, sure. Owen and Oliver built her a cradle from leftover pine. They each carved their names into the edge. Years passed. The cabin became the main house. The boys grew tall, then taller still, their shoulders carrying tools and trust in equal measure. Clara learned to walk on bare earth, her hands always reaching for whatever flower dared sprout first in the thaw. Naomi and Silas grew older, but not apart. They rose early, worked side by side, and watched the land change not just with the seasons, but with the shape of their family. They laughed often. They fought rarely. And when they lay down at night, it was always with the comfort of knowing the other was close enough to touch. One evening, long after the chores were done and the sun had dipped behind the ridge, Naomi and Silas stood on the porch, watching Clara chase fireflies across the yard. Naomi leaned into his side. "I used to think peace came at the end of a thing," she said. "After war, after loss. And now I know peace can be the middle of something, the middle of love, the middle of a life." Silas kissed her temple. "Then may we stay in the middle forever," and they did. On that land, with their children and the quiet strength of what they'd built, they lived the rest of their days side by side. Not waiting, just home.